In this part of the tutorial, we'll be looking at the basic design of our app. So we're going to be designing the layout. This is going to be what it's going to look like. It won't be the final product, but it will be a basic template. So we're going to add in the desired fields in main.storyboard. So again, that's where we design the layout, whereas the other file is where we're going to do the actual coding. So more specifically, our design will include 4 text input boxes, one for each variable. There's going to be a button which will perform the calculation and print out the final value when pressed, and a text label that will display the final value. Now that we are all set up, we're going to go ahead and start our design in iOS. So again, we're doing the first half in iOS and the second half in Droid. So right now I have the viewcontroller.cs and the main.storyboard open. Again, this is all the files in iOS, not Droid. So first things we're going to do is I'm going to take a look at these button handlers in the viewDidLoad method. And I'm going to select this text and just get rid of it. So I'm just going to select it and delete it because we no longer want that. And so that's good. Now we're going to go to main storyboard, and now we're actually going to design the layout. So for this calculator, we basically have 4 input fields. Just as a refresher, I'm going to open the compound interest website again. So we have the 4 fields that we want. We have the principal investment, so this is the first amount of money that we're going to put in. We have the annual interest rates, this is the amount by which the interest increases. This is going to be the number of times are compounded per year, and the number of years. So that's 4 different fields. So I think the best design would be to have 4 input fields, and then a button that actually performs a calculation when pressed, and then some kind of a display field that just displays the total amount of money that you'd have at the end. So if we go to our toolbox in the upper right here, and I'm just going to take the properties window and just drag it down a little bit so we can get a better look at toolbox. There are lots of different tools that we can choose from. So we're going to look under the controls section, and we're going to look for text field. Now text fields are going to be basically the fields where we can input text. So this is going to take our inputs in. So we'll want 4 of these, one for again each of the 4 variables. So if we just select it and drag it over, then we can place it wherever we want. So let's just place it here, okay? And now we're going to take a look at the properties panel. So now I'm just going to take this and increase the size a little bit. So now that we have our first text field selected, let's give it a name. So let's call this TXT, short for text, and we will call this our principal investment, because that's exactly what the first field is going to be. So when I'm naming fields and buttons and basically anything from the toolbox, I like to include this little 3-letter abbreviation first. So text fields are going to be TXT, buttons are going to be BTN, labels are going to be LBL, and so on. So now that we have our first one named, let's have it, let's first increase the size a little bit because we want this text input to be bigger. So we're going to take that and stretch it out. And let's have some kind of a placeholder text. So what we're going to do is under the text field portion of properties, we're going to get rid of this word that says text, and we're going to give it placeholder text. So if we look under placeholder, this will be just text that will send some kind of a message that disappears once the field is clicked on. So let's go ahead and give it some message. Let's say $ principal investment, and I'm going to change that P to lowercase, and if we just click enter, we see it come up here saying dollars principal investments. This is going to be, we know it's going to be in dollars, it's going to be the dollar amount, and we know that we're supposed to enter the principal investment here. Okay, so now we've got the first text field set up, let's add another one. So again, I just selected text field under the toolbox and I just dragged it over into my emulator here. So I'm just going to select it and increase the size again. Okay, so we can fiddle with the specifics later. For now I just want to get the main design plan down. Okay, so we have that field. We're just going to look under properties again. We're going to give this a name. This one's going to be txt, and let's call this the interest rate. Okay, and same as before, we're going to go under text field. We're going to get rid of this text and give it an appropriate placeholder. So let's call this, let's have it say percentage interest. Okay, that's all good. So now let's add our third. We'll add another text field. Increase the size again. And this one we're going to name txt. This is going to be the number of compounds per year. This is going to be compounds per year. And don't want that. Again, under the text field, get rid of text and put a placeholder text that says, let's have number times compounded per year. And we'll add our final text input box. And we're just going to increase the size again. Okay, and notice when I'm increasing and decreasing the size, there's these numbers on the left. So if I do it again, can't really see it in the zoom window, but there we go. So it says width 251, height 30. These are the specific dimensions of this box that we can go out and go back and change specifically. But again, I just want to get a basic layout for now. We can fine-tune it later. Okay, and under properties again, I'm going to give this a name, and it's going to be txt years invested. And getting rid of text again, I'm going to give it a placeholder, so number of years invested is what it's going to say. And again, you want these placeholders to be indicative of what kind of input is actually going in here. For example, if this is the principal investment box, we want the users to know that that's where we're going to enter the principal investment and not the interest or the number of times compounded per year or anything like that. Okay, good. So we've got our input fields in. Now we'll want to add a button. So this button, when pressed, is going to actually make the action happen. So this is going to trigger some kind of method that will perform the calculations and print out our final value. So without this button, we wouldn't really have anything happening in our app. So we could enter these fields, but we wouldn't really have anything happening. So this button is what's going to make everything happen, and we're going to write out the code for it in a little bit. So let's give this a name. We're going to call it btn for button, and calculate, because that's what the button's going to do. And if we scroll down and look under button in properties, where it says button here just under title, we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to say calculate final investment. And that just kind of gives the button some kind of a text, which is more appropriate than just button. Again, we want to make it obvious what exactly everything in this app is going to be doing. And we'll just hit enter and leave that. And last, we'll add a label that's going to go underneath here. And we're going to make this a bit bigger. So the label will display text, but it's going to be text that you can't modify, because we don't want the user to be able to modify the output. All we want is the user to be able to modify these fields, press the button, and have the final output appear down here. I'm going to give this a name. It's going to be LBL label, and we're going to call this, let's call this final investment. Okay, and there is no placeholder for this because it's a label, so we have to give it specific text. So under label, underneath text, where it says label, we're going to get rid of that and say final investment value is, and a colon, and just leave it at that. So now we have our basic setup. It's not the prettiest thing, but we'll fine tune it at the end. So we have an input for final investment or principal investment, an input for interest, an input for number of times compounded per year, and for number of years invested. So once these 4 fields are filled out and the calculate final investment button is clicked, the calculation will be performed and our final value will be displayed down here. So that's how our app's going to work, and this is the rudimentary layout. This is how it's going to look. It's going to be a little better later on, but again, just the basics for now. In this past file tutorial, we designed the basic layout of our app. So we added in 4 text inputs, a button, and a text label in the main.storyboard file. So again, 4 text inputs, 1 for each input, so 1 for each variable. There's going to be a button that when pressed will perform the calculation and print out our final value, and a text label that will contain the final value. So by now you should be able to set up a basic app layout and add in desired widgets and fields. And again, we did this in iOS.